Okay, so one thing we need to do before we can actually run this is add our Gemini API key. We're looking at the env example here, so I don't accidentally show you my real API keys. But the file that you need to edit is the .env file that you already have. We'll need to add a Gemini key here. The way to do this, I'm going to show you, is to open up Google AI Studio. All right, so here we are in AI Studio, and you see this Get API Key link at the bottom. So we're going to click on this. I have a bunch of existing API keys in here. So depending on whether you've already used this for other apps, yours may look a little bit different. And then again, we're going to click on Create API Key up here. You can give it a name. I recommend that you give it a descriptive name so you can later tell it apart from other API keys that you may be using. So maybe call it something like Idea Pipeline or Agentic Pipeline Course or whatever you like best. And then down here, the first time you might need to create a project as well. That refers to a Google Cloud project. That's how everything is tied together underneath the hood. So just go ahead and create one if you don't have one already. And then you should have your API key in here, and then you can click on it. I'm not going to do this, but you can click on it and it'll give you the actual key, which you can then copy and paste into your .env file. While we have this open, actually, there are two more things that I want to show you. Okay, so one, and again, your UI might look a little bit different if you just created this API key. But if you click on Logs and Datasets, and then you select your API key up here, you have this logging toggle. And by default, this is disabled, which means that you won't be able to see any logs in here after you've made Gemini API calls. And these logs are super helpful for debugging and diagnostics. So I would encourage you to turn this on for your API key. We'll actually come back and take a look at the logs later. The other thing I want to show you is the API spend here. This is for my production API key. So this is the one that I use in production, where I run this pipeline every day. Now, my pipeline is a little bit more complicated. I have a few more steps in there. I'm actually creating some social media posts, and I'm creating a podcast, which we're going to do later as well as a bonus. But it's still, sort of representative. So you can see here, my daily cost is somewhere above $1. Some days it's just $1. Some days it's like $1.50. So it kind of varies. This will depend on how many news articles we had on those days, which had to be triaged and extracted and all of that, and so on. So it might be a little bit less for you if you don't create a podcast and you don't create, social media posts and all of that stuff. It should be less than $1 with the exact Gemini models that I'm using. And you might be able to reduce it further if you use lower end models. So depending on what your exact use case is, you might get away with Gemini Flash for a lot of the steps rather than Pro. You also might dial down the inputs a little bit. You might look at fewer news sources or don't paginate through all 10 pages of results, but maybe just 5. So there are a lot of dials here that can help you reduce the costs. But yeah, in terms of order of magnitude, somewhere around $1, 50 cents to $1 is probably realistic for this kind of pipeline in production using Gemini. So one more thing to mention, when you create your API key, it is possible to just use a free API key, to not have a credit card on file. This will severely limit your quota, so you will likely end up getting rate limited with this pipeline. You can potentially work around this by introducing some delays or things like that. But realistically, this will probably be too restrictive for this type of application. So you are going to want to create a paid API key. The exact steps for that are beyond the scope of the course. So it'll involve going into Google Cloud, creating a billing account with a credit card, attaching that to your cloud project, and then the cloud project in turn is associated with your API key in Google AI Studio. So it's a couple of steps, but Google has help pages for all of that here. So I will let you go ahead and do that for your API key, and then just come back after you've had a chance to add the API key and update your .env file, and then we can actually run this pipeline and see what happens.